it is not easy to see the impact of a writer's work. However, there are, let's say, landmarks, or there are pointers along the way. Prizes, accolade, and other accolades that the writer has received. Welcome to Oral Tradition and another adventure in Guyanese literature. And let's also welcome Professor David Dabydeen. Yes, I like to flip this program and start like at the end of an interview. This is your 8th novel, Sweet Li Jie, your 8th novel. We'll talk about it just now, where it's set, where it's ended, etc. Between this and your first novel, let's go back to your first novel, The Intended. Right. And talk us through some of those books, some that were set out of Guyana, but merged with the Guyana locale. Right. People coming from different places, like in Sweet Li Jie, person coming from China, Wuhan province, to Guyana, persons coming from Scotland, Guyanese going to. But a lot of your novels are based, let's say, out of Guyana and culminating in Guyana. Let's start with Intended.
Well, thanks, Petamber. I remember listening to Roy Heath, a very distinguished Guyanese novelist, who said that although he lived most of his life in England, all his dreams are about Guyana. And I suppose it's the same with me, in that although I left Guyana as a boy of 13 in 1969, everything I write about is about, it relates to Guyana. Because they do say that your childhood determines, well, first of all, who you are as a human being, but also what ignites your imagination. I think it was Wordsworth who said that the child is father of the man. And I can't escape writing about Guyana. So although, say, the new novel is set in China in the 19th century, I have to bring some of the Chinese to Guyana, which gives me a space to write about Guyana.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm tethered. I'm not emancipated from Guyana. There's no emancipation day for me, right?
Other writers, other Guyanese writers, Harris, a whole lot of other persons writing. Roy Heath, you mentioned, Harris, Pauline Melville, Sharon Mass, and all those people.
Yeah, John Agard, Grace Nichols. We're a body of writers in the diaspora who are very close to each other in terms of, we don't necessarily see each other every day or every month, but we know each other, we communicate, we're together in conferences, and we support each other in terms of, I would read, say, Pauline Melville, whom I love, and I would say to her, look, I really like this short story, and so on, right? And Grace Nichols, I remember, was so generous to me when I published my first collection of first collection of poems. Grace Nichols, she gave it high praise in public. So we don't compete. We do our own work. We write our own novels. We write differently. We have different styles. But what connects us really is a feeling for Guyana. And that feeling for Guyana is transferred on the page.
There's a phrase passing through my mind. You're like kindred spirits. You and the other writers, other contemporary writers. You don't meet as much, but then you associate in a language that you all know.
Well, look, if Grace Nichols or John Agard or Pauline Melville or Janice Lowe write poems or a book of poems or a novel, you have to read it because you are part of that kinship, as you said, you know. So we keep in touch with each other physically and in terms of WhatsApp and so on, but also by reading each other. I remember, for example, and not just the diaspora, I remember reading a line from Martin Carter, which I had to, in some ways, transform into whatever I was writing at the time. Wilson Harris, an obvious, complete, well, almost complete inspirer for me, you know. I mean, I've written 2 novels now. 2 of the novels that I've written have Harrisian characters.
Harris is inside here.
There is a character in that novel called Harris. Then I wrote another novel where there were 2 Catholic priests. One was called Father Wilson and one was called Father Harris. So you can't escape being moved and inspired and influenced by writers like Wilson Harris, and in my case also Trinidadian writer like Sam Selvin, and of course you can't escape V.S. Naipaul.
Of course.
You know, I've had characters called Vidya, because I'm thinking of V.S. Naipaul. So it's a community of writers. We influence each other. We interact with each other's texts. Sometimes we quote each other in our writings, in our literary writings.
Write back to each other.
Yeah, you write back to each other, write for each other. Yeah, there's all these beautiful interactions. And what is beautiful about it is there's no money involved. Nobody sells enough to make a living. Or very, very, very few writers can be full-time writers. If you don't sell, you teach. So that's why I'm an academic. And Grace Nichols and Pauline Melville, they also do other work, you know. And that is really good, because none of us are millionaires, you know, so there's no envy. We are a community of literature and a community of poverty. But the poverty is not in the writing. That's our richness. That's our treasure. So I'm glad I'm not in a business community. I'm so happy to be in the community of the imagination.
Beautiful. Like the scientist who said imagination is greater than science.
Maybe that was Karl Popper, was it? I don't know, the philosopher. But you know, the famous statement by Derek Walcott, our Nobel laureate, no nation but the imagination. Right?
Lovely. That's a lovely line.
It is a beautiful line.
Beautiful
Well,
line.
that is how he writes. He's lavish. He's lavish and rich in everything he writes. Yeah.
Oh boy, that's great. I still can't get over, David, how modest you are about your accomplishment. You know, 5 times winner of the Guyana Prize for Literature. I mean, there are other writers, but you've won it 5 times. There are other books that have been nominated or shortlisted for some really renowned prizes, and yet you're so humble about these things.
Well, it's not being humble. It's just realizing that there's more to be written. You know, and your writing or your writing career is permanently unfinished. There's something else to be written. So when you've finished writing something, it gets a prize, it doesn't get a prize, you're always thinking of what to write next. It's almost like an addiction. I mean, even as I am speaking to you now, I'm thinking, a little part of my brain is thinking, well, what will I start thinking about writing after this interview?
That's why
you have to be modest, because you know that your work is unfinished. And other people's work are excellent, you know? and you strive to emulate and to get to that level of excellence. If you are arrogant,
You're still learning.
Look, I spend a lot of time reading Chinese short stories now, and I learn so much about how crazy the scenarios are. I mean, it's magical realism. So you're learning, and you're learning
Some
all
of
the
that
time.
is inside here.
Well, undoubtedly, whatever you read is then consumed by your mind and your imagination, and then comes out of your finger and your pen in a curious way. But no, you are what you read as well, And you talk about modesty. My friends, Fred Degar, Pauline Melville, we've all won prizes. Think of John Agard, my friend Johnny Agard and Grace Nichols. The Queen's Gold Medal, which is the highest literary award in Britain, both of them. So we're just this proud community. Not proud is the wrong term. This community of scribblers. We're scribblers, right?
I started by saying how difficult it is to assess the impact of a writer's work. Right? But your work is extensive and has been translated in many languages. I understand. I understand. It's in Chinese, Japanese, French, German, Spanish, Turkish. Yeah. But then we've got other writers. I mean,
absolutely.
Whose work
one
been
of
translated?
the lovely things about Guyanese writing is that we've been translated into different languages, so reaching out beyond Guyana and beyond Europe, beyond the United Kingdom and North America. And this is not just in fiction, the work of Pauline Melville and so on, novels of Pauline Melville and other writers. It's also in non-fiction. For example, Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is in different languages. It's in different languages.
Yes.
Or Chetty Jagan's Western Trial, which is an autobiography, political autobiography, is in different languages. So it's I mean, I find it interesting when one of my novels was done in Mandarin, and I got the book, and it looked much more beautiful than the English alphabet. I thought, gosh, it's almost like a work of art.
Chinese script.
The almost like calligraphy. But no, it's if we're to reach out as writers, or even as Guyanese say, then translation is obviously helpful and a method of connecting with different communities of writers.
Of writers.
Yeah, different communities of writers and readers.
And
yes.
readers. And readers. And the critic, or the people who appreciate your writing enough to put together 6 volumes on your work.
Yes.
6 volumes. 6 volumes. And you sit down here quietly. Tell us about this. Look, there's another one here. Look. The most recent. Like Diamonds from Dirt. Right. And these 6 volumes comprise of us, 30 academics from all over the world. Finland, Poland, Iceland, I don't know where.
Well, it's just there has been a growing interest, strong interest in the field of literary studies on post-colonial literature. And that interest has been driven by the excellence of the writers.
Wow.
Imagine a little space like us, a little region of us in the English-speaking Caribbean. We've produced 2 Nobel Prize winners, Derek Walcott and V.S. Naipaul. So the academics catch up with the writers who are glorious and splendid and cannot be ignored. And so the books that have been written about me owe their existence to people like Naipaul and Walcott, who excelled at the international level. Do you understand what I'm saying? And also there are lots and lots of essays and MA dissertations and PhDs published on Guyanese writers in Britain.
Yes. Yes.
So we do support a kind of a literary industry in that sense, you know. I don't mean that in a cynical way, but it is very rewarding and very, you know, one is always grateful that somebody is looking at whatever it is you made, in my case a novel or a poem, and you still marvel at the fact that they take up one of your books and read it and are moved enough to write something about it. You're still struck by surprise, you know. And I think that's for all the writers.